One of the key figures in the Nazi concentration camp system was a man named Oswald Pohl. He began his career in the mid-1920s as a paymaster working for the Sturmabteilung, or the stormtroopers. He would then be promoted to work right for the top of the SS, for the SS leadership, in 1933, the year that the Nazis took power. Over the next 12 years of this dictatorship, Pohl would rise through the ranks of the SS, eventually becoming incredibly powerful. He was handed total control of the concentration camps in 1942. Well, it's the next 3 years, the final 3 years of the dictatorship, that were exactly the most deadly in the concentration camps, directly as a result of Pohl's leadership, pretty much thanks to a policy that he called Vernichtung durch Arbeit, or execution through work. Pohl's crimes, though, were not just limited to distant concentration camps far away from the capital. In fact, he brought his work home with him to Berlin as well. This is the latest in my series where we look at, well, the houses where these kind of people lived. There's not really so much to see of his house, we will talk about it, but yeah, we have to talk about all the other places that he lived and his career as a whole as well. So, let's do it. I'm sure that a lot of you watching probably haven't heard of the name Pohl before, or if you have, you've probably forgotten about him. He's not one of the big names that comes up so often, so yeah, probably this video won't do as well as the one where I talked about Adolf Hitler and so, but you know, you can only talk about those people so much, and actually it's important to see just how big the system was and how deep it ran, especially when it comes to corruption. The kind of people like Pohl who were often in this not just for their own political, ideological reasons, but really to vastly enrich themselves as well. So this is the kind of area that he lived in. Obviously it would have changed a lot since then, but if you take a walk around here today, there are some quite fancy houses, fancy villas. Pretty sure that the ambassador of Luxembourg just lives around the corner. That's got to be a cushy job, eh? So yeah, let's get into it with Pohl. Okay, so it's when we get to the end of the street, Koserstrasse, up to the corner here at number 21, that we find what used to be Pohl's house. Although it was not originally Pohl's house, it was a house that he stole from a Jewish family. But that was around the 1939, 1940. It's hard to get the exact date. So we have to go back a bit. How did we reach this point? Oswald Pohl is born in 1892. He's the fifth of 8 children. Around the age of 19 or 20, he will join the Navy and then therefore will serve in the German Navy during the First World War, where he became a paymaster. After World War I, he continues to work for the Navy as a paymaster, but of course all things military see something of a reduction in the post-World War I period, thanks to the Treaty of Versailles. And so Pohl then leaves the Navy and starts working as a paymaster for the Freikorps, officially a veterans organization, in practice a hyper-conservative, quite violent, anti-left organization. There's going to be some overlap throughout the 20s, 30s, 40s of the Freikorps and the Nazi Party. A lot of Freikorps members will go on to join the Nazi Party, including Oswald Pohl. He becomes Nazi Party member 30,842. I hope that's correct. I checked it a few times. And he joined in the middle of the 1920s, and he starts working as a paymaster for the Sturmabteilung, for the SA. He's quite good at his job. Things run well under Pohl. And so in 1933, he captures Heinrich Himmler's attention and then starts to work for Himmler's staff directly. So he's right up at the top, the exact kind of job that you want if you're looking for a promotion. Of course, over the next years, the Nazis will gain more and more control, and so too within that system will the SS under Himmler's leadership become more and more powerful, and Oswald Pohl's position really starts to rise as well. He gains more and more ranks, eventually becoming a Gruppenführer, but he's also able to set up the, wait for it, Wirtschaftsverwaltungshauptamt, the Economic and Administration Main Office. Now this is an SS organization whose job it is to manage SS companies. So the SS becomes kind of like a state within a state, and of course they're in a lot of this to make money as well. So it's under the WVHA that companies like Texled are set up. Texled was the SS textiles company. It basically meant that they could make uniforms and leather goods, and of course could use the labor of the concentration camps to do this for great profit. Pohl's baby, if you will, was the Deutsche Erd- und Steiner company, DEST, and it's through this company that the Nazis would run quarries and brick factories in their concentration camps as well, kind of feeding the megalomania of Adolf Hitler and Albert Speer when it comes to building great big new monumental buildings, not just in Berlin, but really across Germany. The ultimate goal of the WVHA was to maximize the economic benefits, really, of the concentration camp system for the Nazis. It made not just the SS relatively wealthy and well-funded, but it made Pohl personally rich as well. In fact, by the time it all came to an end, this was only one of 3 properties that Pohl and his wife, Eleanor von Brüning, owned, and they were all rather luxurious. One that she had owned, so Pohl had kind of acquired through marriage, was a country estate out in Bavaria, near to the Dachau concentration camp. And, well, they had that renovated by prisoners from Dachau. This is going to be a running theme. In fact, they had a country estate at a place which actually looks quite hard to pronounce. It's not a usual German spelling. I would say Comthurey. If you do know, let me know. That was very near to the Ravensbrück concentration camp, so the opposite direction from Berlin and much closer out to the north. Ravensbrück was an important place for one of Pohl's SS companies, Texled. This is where a lot of the female workers would in particular do a lot of sewing work, among many other things at that camp.
Hello from the editing suite. Just a cool thing here. I thought I mentioned Ravensbrück a couple of times in this episode. And if you want to find out more about that camp specifically, the only camp under the Nazis that was specifically built for women, then you are in luck. At the time of editing, Season 3 of History Flakes, the Berlin History podcast that I do with my friend Pip, has just launched. And in the first 2 episodes, we look at Ravensbrück. So in the first episode, it's more of a general history of the camp. And in the second episode, we look at 3 of its most well-known prisoners, let's say. 3 completely different stories. One, a French/British SOE agent that enters occupied Europe. Another, a Russian prisoner. And yeah, terrible things happen to her. And then the third is actually a Spanish prisoner, a prisoner that would be known to many Spanish viewers, I suppose, but outside of that, by really not many of us, because when we think of this period, World War II, and so Spain was, of course, officially neutral, despite being led by Franco and the fascists. This means that a lot of leftists escaped Spain under Franco and ended up going, of course, to the neighboring country, France, and there, later on in the 40s, ended up being picked up by the Nazis. So yeah, lots to explore when it comes to Ravensbrück. And hey, I thought you'd like to know that. And of course, there are, as yet, no sponsors on this channel. So me, I am the sponsor. Meaning, if you like what I have to say about all of these things, you should, of course, scroll down below this video, click the thumb, and click the subscribe button as well. All right, let's carry on.
That then leaves this house right here. And so we get to the fancy house on the corner, built originally by a wine merchant, a Jewish man named Ignaz Thomann, who came up from what is today Slovakia, but back then the place where he comes from was part of the Austrian Empire. He lived here with his first wife until her death. After that, after she died, he remarried. He married a woman named Franziska or Fanny, and they lived here together until his death on the 10th of October 1939, when the vultures came swooping in. You see, the Nazis had a policy of Aryanization. Things that belong to Jews, things of value in their minds, shouldn't belong to Jews and instead should be passed on to, well, members of the Nazi party or so-called Aryans in their minds. And of course, the highest ranking people got the best stuff. So you can see it was a totally corrupt system. Now, it could be jewelry, it could be literal money, gold, it could be furniture, or in this case, it could be entire houses. Fanny Thomann was forced to sell this place to the Nazis for 80,000 Reichsmarks. And she sold it, of course, not that she probably would have known, to Oswald Pohl, who not only moved in, but had the entire place renovated, this time by prisoners of the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. Not only did prisoners from the camp renovate the place, but they also lived and worked here. There were 5 of them that were here permanently. A similar thing was done out at the country estate Comthurey, where actually the whole place operated like a satellite camp of Ravensbrück. There were far more than 5 people there. They turned it into something of a miniature farm. This shows you the kind of person that Pohl was, that he was someone that wasn't afraid to live in and around this stuff, to surround himself with his prisoners, with his victims. And then we reach the big changes of 1942. Early in that year, Heinrich Himmler takes the inspectorate of the concentration camps, the office that up to this point had been running the camps, and puts them under the control of Oswald Pohl's WVHA, the Economic and Administration Main Office that I mentioned before. Pohl is very excited by this. You have to remember the Wannsee Conference, where the Nazis had pretty much set the course of trying to kill all Jews in Europe. That had also taken place in early 1942. So by April of that year, with his newfound powers, Pohl is excited. And he invites leaders from the concentration camp system up to Berlin, and in April 1942, he presents to them his plan, how the camps are going to be run now that he's the boss. And he tells them about Vernichtung durch Arbeit, execution through work. Of course, the children and the elderly, they are going to be gassed. It's Pohl that signs off on the expansion of the gas chambers at Auschwitz, essentially setting up the most notorious death center, arguably in history, in general, not just at this time. Vernichtung durch Arbeit, though, that applies to people of working age. Essentially, we don't care what happens to these people. We will work them to their deaths. That is going to be a fundamental point of the concentration camp system, of the economic model of the concentration camp system. Of course, at this time, 1942, yeah, the Nazis have taken over a lot of Europe, but they want to take over a lot more. Their costs are spiraling. In fact, there's another company that's set up by the SS that will also manage armaments, right? Making sure that they have enough bullets, enough weapons to fight their various enemies. It's important to note that in the final 3 years of the dictatorship, the concentration camps reached their peak in the terms of the number of deaths. They reached that under Oswald Pohl. So it's in these final 3 years that really the vast majority of the Nazis' victims are killed. And when you look at these staggering numbers, 1943, 44, those are, of course, the absolute worst. The Nazis had made it their goal to kill all Jews in Europe. They eventually will kill roughly 2/3 of them. And of course, there'll be many other groups that are murdered by the Nazis as well. Among the Nazis' millions of victims was Fanny Thälmann. She never received her 80,000 marks for her house. Instead, in 1943, she was deported to the Ravensbrück concentration camp. She was killed there on the 8th of February, 1945, only 3 months before Nazi Germany would surrender to the Allies. And when it came to the end of the war, Oswald Pohl went on the run. He hid with his daughters in northern Germany, but he was picked up by British forces in 1946. He was trialed at Nuremberg where, of course, he said he had no idea about any of these things that were going on. Nobody believed him, thankfully, and he was executed by hanging in 1951. This house today is now the property of the Freie Universität, the Free University. And in between my takes here, a couple of people have been coming and going. I've been getting less weird looks than normal. I hope you liked this video. I guess it's kind of niche in a way and kind of fundamentally important in another to look at Oswald Pohl and this topic. So yeah, I hope it's been interesting. If it has, you should subscribe, you should like and comment and all those good things. They do really help, and of course they help me make more of these things and bring more to you as well. That's it for this one. Goodbye.